Boda boda, a bicycle or motorcycle taxi commonly found in East Africa. Their presence in East Africa is attributed to a number of factors, and key among them is increased demand for faster, easy and affordable movement. But the term boda boda has a semantic appeal. Welcome to the Kenya-Uganda border at Busia, a busy metropolis teeming with trade, exchange of goods and services, customs checks, security and health surveillance, as well as intercultural social exchanges that form an innate part of the ways of life at the border crossing. The border town is one of the busiest border crossings in the country. Many vehicles transporting goods arrive and leave the one-stop border post where customs and revenue collection procedures take place. In Busia, goods and services change hands all the time, but there are also the social aspects of life for both Kenyans and Ugandans. The border crossing here is only an imaginary line. People here are interconnected by intermarriage and clan. They cross the border for social events such as weddings, funerals, and even birthday celebrations. A keen observation of this bustling town reveals that for both Kenyans and Ugandans, trade and stately interests are not all that cements relations for the two countries. Social interests too play a big part for people on both sides of the divide. With all this activity, ACT Kenya, in partnership with Life and Peace Institute (LPI), the East African Sub-Regional Support Initiative for the Advancement of Women (YASI) of Uganda, and Inter-Africa Group IAG of Ethiopia, sought to study coexistence in the border towns and get a clearer perspective in matters of cross-border relations. The project is supported by the European Union, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development (IGAD), and other regional economic communities. From the Kenyan side of the border, you won't fail to notice at least 3 entry and exit points. However, only one is the official gateway for goods and human traffic. The other 2 are on either side of the official crossing. Here, government agencies in charge of revenue and security monitor activity as vehicles and goods are checked and either denied or granted entry from either side of the border posts.
Nikipitia gari yangu hapo ya Diazi atuwanaishika. Atukia ni gazeti blue. Sijui vitu gani. Za wengine zikifika azishika. Hiyo ndio ubaguzi iko. Unaona kama unashika Waganda wanawashika kama ni Wakenya. Wakenya hawana problem. Waganda sina kwamba wananyanyasa sisi wa Kenya. Bwana tusikie ile boda post hapa ile mengi. Boda posta gani? Customs. Ushuru yote utaweza kulipia hivi viazi. Uganda inatoesha ushuru. Unajua Kenya tukiingiza ferry ship hawatoi ushuru. Lakini Uganda hata ferry ship ndio ina bei kali hata kushinda magendo. Sasa ushuru yao. Sema hivi. Huyu ni wasalamu tu. Niwache story yangu kwa sababu ya salamu. Viazi kwa Uganda ni free. Ni free. Lakini Kenya nilisikia gari wanalipisha 20,000. Nani nilikudanganya? Nilienda na Asimo juzi nikitaka kupitisha 7,000. Nilikuwa na Asimo juzi nikitaka nipitishe gari yangu 7,000. Kenya ni shilingi. Nani alikwambia 20,000? Tumekuwa na mpaka kwa kesi. Kama ni 7,000 kwa nini tunahangaika? Ni 7,000. Sasa unaona hapa unaokoa hapo 5,000 kwa sababu ni watoto wa kutenda peke yake 3,000. Unaokoa mama Esther mama Esther kwa sababu umesikia watu wanasoma viazi na kumbuka na wale wa offloader hata ipite custom, offloader is a must.
The Busia border crossing is perhaps the busiest point of entry and exit between Kenya and its neighbors. Bureaucracy sometimes makes movement and trade difficult for small traders in Busia, but it's perhaps the lack of information on simplified trade that's a major source of avoidance of the one-stop border posts by some traders. Communities living in Busia have therefore established the other informal points of exit into Uganda. On either side of the manned border posts are the two other crossing points. Soko Sofia is this crossing to the right-hand side of the official border posts. Goods passed through this point informally under mutual consent between the cross-border communities. The Soko Marachi, or Soko Matope as it's popularly known, also supports trade. It's however not as busy as the other two crossing points. Here, traders mainly sell cereals. At this market,
Unaona watu wenye wanapamaka wanabeba hata chang'aa ndani Kikuyu kama 3 ya 55. Sasa yeye ameweka kakunia kwa nini na makata amepaka nini anapita hapa.
Anatipaka ya kwamba ndiye.
Anasema huyo ni mtu ya makatu, weka chini. Weka chini. Unaona vile ndio anatulipuka hapa.
Na hiyo haiwezi kosa AK47.
Alafu ana njia mingi. Samaki zote za kutoka Uganda zinapita huko. Zinapita hizo zikienda hawezi kulipa ushuru hapo. Unaona?
Across the border in Uganda, there are organized groups of traders going on with their businesses. They cross over to Kenya to sell their wares and seek other government services such as healthcare and education. These school buses are ferrying Ugandan children back home from schools in Kenya. But why are there glaring differences in trade and life at the same border post between the two countries? The one-stop border post works seamlessly and almost flawlessly, save for the occasional delays, causing trucks to form long queues awaiting clearance. There is an urgent need for simplified trade practices among trading communities in Busia. In Uganda, the official border post is controlled by the Uganda Revenue Authority. Here, there is a scanner for trucks ferrying goods into Uganda. At the border crossing, money changers are on hand to assist traders and travelers with Ugandan or Kenyan currency. Through the expansive Chalbi Desert, we make our way to Moyale. The long and winding highway that was constructed by the Kenyan government as part of the Lamu Port, Southern Sudan-Ethiopia Transport Corridor, or LAPSET, takes us through the counties of Laikipia and Isiolo to Marsabit to the Kenya-Ethiopia border at Moyale. The border is 789 kilometers north of Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Communities living here are pastoralists, and interclan clashes have been reported amongst resident tribes of Borana, Gabra, Burji, Oromo and Gare over land and other resources. There is the occasional spilling over of violence into Ethiopian pastoral communities, and the effects are felt across the border. The locals buy their goods and other commodities from across the border into Ethiopia. The government is, however, keen on security, and movement is prohibited from across the border after 7 o'clock in the evening. Due to security restrictions, we are unable to film any activities on the border posts. The Kenya-Ethiopia corridor is a closed border, an ambitious transport corridor that envisions vibrant movement for goods and people through Kenya into the landlocked Ethiopia. So far, construction of shipping berths at the Lamu port is ongoing, with the Lamu-Isiolo highway still in the works. The highway from Isiolo to Moyale is already in operation. Ethiopians coming to Kenya come to hawk their wares, selling shoes and belts, as well as buy electronics. But there is also cross-border trading for donkeys and camels and other livestock. Sources at the revenue collector say there is rising concern whenever livestock cross the border without requisite documentation for tax. The rampant tension and fears for interclan fights affects smooth trade a great deal at the Moyale border crossing. The border here is also unique. Unlike at the Kenya-Uganda border, Kenyan trucks transporting goods into Ethiopia must offload at Moyale on the Kenyan side, and goods loaded into Ethiopian trucks for onward transport into Ethiopia. This process consumes travel and delivery time, thus affecting trade flow between the two countries. The Kenya-Ethiopia border can be described as both porous and restrictive. On the one hand, it's not easy to ferry goods into Kenya from Ethiopia due to high security surveillance along the highway and at the border posts. But on the other hand, goods move on motorcycles unchecked from Kenya into Ethiopia, which creates an impression of security imbalances between trading communities that live in the border town of Moyale. As we filmed for this documentary, security apparatus were deployed to monitor our operations at the informal crossing point, which makes it difficult to capture any further information. The Moyale border post espouses a lot of potential for trade facilitation. However, completion of the LAPSSET project might just be the requisite engine to open up trade between Kenya and Ethiopia and create a one-stop border post mainly for trading of goods and services. Resolution of recurrent conflict between communities living along the Kenyan-Ethiopian border is also a key factor that will spur growth and lead to more vibrant cooperation among the border communities that currently live in perpetual suspicion.